Hello, I'm Howard Spence. I'm Eaton County Commissioner here in Delta Township representing the 4th District. I wanted to take some time to share with my friends and with the general public information relating to a topic which I feel is very important, which came before the Eaton County Board of Commissioners just the past week on March 21st, 2018. At that meeting, there was an agenda item proposed whereby the full Board of Commissioners would vote to accept a resolution which required or encouraged the Barry-Eaton Health Department to rescind time of sale transaction regulation. The time of sale transaction regulation actually relates to the inspection of septic tanks on properties located within Eaton County and also Barry County. The Barry County Eaton County Public Health Department is a shared governmental facility between these two counties. These two counties have a lot of demographic characteristics in common, but within Eaton County in particular, there is an area called Delta Township where I reside and where I represent people, which is much more urban, or at least suburban, adjacent to the city of Lansing, and also adjacent to the Grand River, which runs through Delta. And the issue came forth in this way. The health department has for over a decade had a regulation in place that was designed to help the health department monitor and make sure that septic tanks in Eaton and Barry County did not overflow, spill sewage, human waste, and feces material into the groundwater, so that it would get into the aquifer, because large areas within Eaton County actually derive their drinking water from the aquifer through wells. Here in Delta Township, we do have some septic tanks, but not many, and we do have some wells, but most of Delta Township is provided sanitized and well-maintained water supply from the Lansing Board of Water and Light. And Delta Township has its own sewage treatment program and facility to which most of the residences and businesses are connected, which would make sure that all human waste and much industrial waste that is in the form of sewage would be properly monitored and treated. But in the out-county areas, the more rural areas, there is actually no mechanism other than the time of sale transaction program, which I'll call TOST, T-O-S-T, that has the ability to actually inspect the septic tanks which exist on these rural properties, or at least on the properties that are not attached to municipal water systems. And the TOST program originated because it required that at the time that any piece of property where the septic tank was sold or title was transferred, then the seller and the buyer would have to have that property inspected to make sure the septic tank was still functioning, well maintained, and above all that it was not spilling toxic materials, feces, sewage into the aquifer at a rate which would endanger the health of the aquifer, and also make sure that no human waste or sewage pathogens or germs or activity occurred that would pollute and contaminate our drinking water in the aquifer. This program has worked well for a number of years over the past decade, and statistics have begun to be generated and analyzed, which shows that as a result of this TOST program, a number of septic tanks have been identified which are polluting or have been polluting the aquifer at rates which endangered the public health. And when those particular properties were discovered strictly as a result of the TOST program, the owners of the property had to repair the septic tank systems to make sure that they were safe and operating within the state and federal guidelines for spillage and contamination. And that sometimes required that the septic tank systems be significantly repaired or even replaced. And replacing a septic tank can be a relatively expensive proposition. The actual inspections themselves, which were provided by staff from the Barry-Eaton Department of Public Health, was not a very significant number or amount. It basically tracked and was similar to the inspection costs that sellers would encounter from other inspections, such as inspections for mold, mildew, asbestos, code violations, this type of thing. But the TOST regulation required that if these violations were found and the septic tanks were dangerous, then the seller and the buyer would have to work out an arrangement, which might be an adjustment in price, to assure that the septic tanks were properly repaired or replaced. And until such a repair occurred, or until at least an agreement was reached with the staff of the Public Health Department that the septic tank would be promptly brought into compliance, the TOST regulation prohibited the various county clerks from actually recording and accepting for filing changes in the ownership status or title of the property. In other words, unless the health department was willing to certify that either the septic tanks function at an acceptable level or had been replaced, or that there was a compliance plan in place that was acceptable, then the county clerk would not accept the deed for filing, and in effect, in most cases, that would kill the sale transaction. And a small number of people who were required to make these changes went to their county commissioners and representatives, especially in Barry County, which is a county adjacent to Eaton County, which shares the public health department. And they persuaded their county commissioners in Barry County that the TOST program should be rescinded or repealed. And over a decade ago, both Barry and Eaton County had passed resolutions authorizing and encouraging the TOST program. The TOST program itself, as I indicated, was actually maintained, administered, and regulated by the health department itself, not the county boards of commissioners. And it was with that background and setting that on March 21st, 2018, at the Eaton County Board of Commissioners meeting, a group of commissioners who were persuaded that this particular regulation should be rescinded or repealed brought forth a motion. And the motion had been anticipated, which would basically repeal the TOST regulation here in Eaton County. And a large number, a very large number by county commission standards of public members of the public, residents, citizens, came forward to speak and either support or opposition of the proposed motion that would repeal these TOST regulations. And in fact, Delta Township, which I represent on the Board of Commissioners, has a board of trustees which had become alarmed because they could clearly see that there were going to be problems with the aquifer and water that some of the residents here in Delta Township would be consuming, and they passed a resolution and sent it to the Board of Commissioners, and representatives like me strongly opposing that the TOST regulation be repealed. And so this was a setting, as I indicated, there were probably over 100 people present from the public, and a number of the commissioners had a chance to speak either pro or con against the concept of repealing the TOST regulation. I myself and my fellow commissioners from the Delta Township area strongly opposed the changes which some of the more rural commissioners were supporting. And while the safety and nature of our public aquifer and drinking water should not be a partisan issue, it actually became that. And the TOST regulation was repealed after considerable discussion and debate and public input on March 21st on a vote which ended up being strictly a partisan line political party vote. Our particular commission here in Eaton County, which is a more rural county, is controlled by members of the Republican Party, and the 9 Republican commissioners all voted to repeal the TOST regulations. There are 6 Democrats on the Eaton County Board of Commissioners, and they all come from the more urban area of Delta Township, and they all voted against the proposition of repealing these TOST regulations. And it was a significantly contested proposition. The potential for detriment to the drinking water and the public health of Eaton County residents and Delta Township residents was well documented and discussed. Among the members of the public who did appear and provide testimony was expert testimony against repealing this particular regulation, which was presented by a number of people, including Dr. Joan B. who is the Homer Nowlin Chair in Water Research in the Department of Fisheries and Wildlife, Crops and Soil here at Michigan State University. Delta Township, Eaton County, and Ingham County and the city of Lansing are all pretty much geographically home to Michigan State University. And Dr. Rose strongly opposed rescinding the TOST regulation, indicating that it was an effective regulation, that rescinding it or repealing it would significantly endanger the quality and purity of the water, which we all consume here in mid-Michigan, in the greater Lansing area, and in Eaton County and Delta Township. And she and also a medical doctor who sent testimony indicated that there were a number of waterborne diseases which would likely be generated as a result of any increase in the sewage content, the human fecal content of the groundwater. And among those numerous diseases which they anticipated would occur would be E. coli, diarrhea, a number of actual diseases, some of which were fatal. And the opposition to leaving the TOST regulation in place also had some speakers, but they were basically lay people, and they raised a number of issues to support repealing the regulation. They were a wide variety, all the way from people arguing some constitutional theory that the property rights of individual homeowners were so great that they should not be compromised by even allowing government officials and inspectors onto private property, and they characterized that as a constitutional right. There were people who indicated that they had been living on land and they had septic tanks which existed in various stages of repair, and they thought they had great health, and they didn't think that they presented any sort of danger to even their basic neighbors next door on the next piece of property who may have had drinking water wells into the same aquifer into which their septic tanks were being emptied. They raised issues that in the city of Lansing, some of the industrial sites there were dumping what they characterized to be millions of gallons of water and sewage into the Grand River and therefore into the basic aquifer, and that the small amount of fecal material and related human waste and sewage which would come from these properties with damaged or non-functioning septic tanks was minuscule in comparison. A whole variety of issues which focus more on their own concern of what was really actually a very few situations which required maintenance, repair, or replacement of septic tanks. And so following the heated discussion, the overall Board of Commissioners did approve a resolution which I opposed that would rescind or repeal the time of sale transaction regulations. And basically, from my perspective, the Board of Commissioners said that they did not particularly care about the fact that these septic tanks would not be inspected by any government agency or the Department of Health at any time. Some of the people who supported repealing the regulation suggested that, well, maybe the banks that are financing transactions will require the inspections that are presently triggered by the time of sale transaction. Some others basically raised issues that, in retrospect, I thought were not very persuasive, and I indicated that in my comments at the public hearing. But the topic was sufficiently important in my mind, especially given the fact that we are only 50 miles away from Flint, Michigan, and many of you all know already about the water quality problems that arose in Flint on two levels. One was the lead poisoning that resulted from state government decisions to change the water supply, which led to actual lead poisoning of about 4,000 children in the city of Flint. But the more relevant problem that developed in Flint with the quality of water related to the fact that when that change in water source in Flint was made, lots of additional sewage, including human waste, was dumped into the Flint River, which is a cesspool and polluted in and of itself already. And that shortly after that government decision was made to change the water, and there was pollution and contamination in Flint, there was a significant and severe spike in cases of Legionnaire's disease, and people did die. And subsequent to that transaction and the development of Legionnaire's disease, the Attorney General for the state of Michigan has already issued criminal complaints alleging manslaughter to some of the bureaucrats and politicians who were involved in what appears to have been actions that caused additional dumping of sewage into the aquifer and Flint River, thereby causing an epidemic of Legionnaire's disease. So that's the background. And I've articulated as best I can in a short period of time my position in opposition to this regulation, which the Board of Commissioners has now completed and approved. So the time of sale transaction in Eaton County and also in Barry County will no longer be enforced or in place following its repeal when the Barry-Eaton County Board of Public Health meets in the near future. And I think that's regrettable. I'm a person who believes in science. I found the testimony of medical doctors and of Dr. Rose, who is an internationally known expert dealing with septic tank pollution, persuasive. I myself thought that even from a cost-benefit analysis, the savings for a few people who choose to reside in areas that require septic tanks and who do not want to maintain their septic tanks and who have a disregard for the consequences of leaving defective, leaking, dangerous septic tanks in place. I have little empathy with their concerns that they may have to repair their property to bring it up to a code. The code still remains, but now that TOST in Eaton County and Barry County is being repealed, even though the code is there will be no enforcement, there will be no inspections. The people who are owning the property and selling the property will be required to make a decision as to whether or not they want to have their septic tanks inspected or repaired, or to even repair them. And those decisions will be completely voluntary, even though there are minor penalties and potentially significant penalties, including criminal convictions for people who knowingly and continually dump sewage into our water supply here in mid-Michigan. If nobody inspects those properties, then effectively the standards that are required by both the federal government and the state of Michigan are meaningless. Any violations of those standards will not be detected. So I'm sharing this with you. And at the public hearing, I also had an opportunity to video record myself on my cell phone camera the testimony and statements of several of the members of the Board of Commissioners for Eaton County who either spoke for or against repealing the TOST regulation and protections, and also the testimony of several of members of the public who wanted to come forward and to make their statements about why they either supported repealing the time of sale transaction water quality protection regulations or leaving them in place. And those are videos I'm also putting up on the internet, and they will be separate and distinct YouTube videos showing the testimony of some of the commissioners and some of the people speaking. And I think that one of the reasons I do that is from a transparency and accountability perspective. When elected officials make decisions that disregard the public health of their neighbors, I think that the voters and those who believe in science and in public health and safety and the future quality of life of our children should know who has taken positions and allow those politicians or bureaucrats or whoever to explain to the public their positions and what the benefit is to the community from allowing a very few polluters to continue polluting. So those are also up on YouTube under my production name on YouTube, which is Minority ADR. And I invite you to look at those, and if you or your neighbors have questions about it, talk to your representative, the person that you vote for and elect, and ask them to justify and rebut some of the statements that are made there and concerns that are raised. And also, hopefully, I will be able to get up some links to documentary testimony that was given, and also perhaps a video of the testimony of Dr. Joan Rose. I think it's a sort of a sad situation that future generations of our community here in Delta Township and in the general Lansing area will one day look back and wonder where the pure, sanitary, healthy water of the state of Michigan and of Delta Township and Eaton County and the city of Lansing disappeared to. And they will then wonder what was the basis for the decision that instead of improving the monitoring and regulatory requirements for pure water, what caused elected officials to knowingly decide to disregard the public health safety issues that people with scientific backgrounds and experience know. And I think that they can ask that question also, especially in light of the fact that it has become very obvious that public policy decisions by state and local officials here in the Michigan have resulted in significant issues about the quality of our water, which are highlighted by examples that we already know about and bemoan in the city of Flint. Hopefully, the scientific fact that even minor increases of certain types of sewage pollution can lead to diseases which can cause death and or hepatitis and a number of other encephalitis and a number of other diseases which I believe to be significant and serious. They'll wonder what was that Eaton County Board of Commissioners and what were those citizens and residents who spoke out for reducing the quality of water regulations thinking, and what did they benefit? A few people saving a few $1,000s to repair defective septic tank systems which they knew were defective. It is almost amounting to a public health nuisance, and I think they should be accountable for that. I hope that science is proved wrong, and I hope that none of the people of Delta Township, for example, suffer as a result of what I see to be uneducated gambles, selfish gambles on the public health of our people. And one day we'll wonder why businesses and people may not want to move to the Delta Township or Eaton County area in the same way that now we see people hesitating to move into the city of Flint. So again, thank you for taking these 20 or 30 minutes to listen to my concerns, and I hope that you will educate yourself. There will be, at the conclusion of this videotape, some links which you can follow to find hard copies of written materials that were submitted in support of not repealing the TOST regulations. Thank you again.